Last week I was not in the temple. I was up at Ananda village working on an assignment that Swami Kriyananda has given to me. I've written a letter that many of you have received. Many of you listening to this later will also have received the letter, but if not, I also want to talk about that. About a year ago, Swamiji Kriyananda, who's the founder of Ananda, decided he wanted to write a book, and the book would be called Miracles and Answered Prayers. And he solicited from many people via the wonderful system of the email system of the internet, just asking people to send to him stories of their own experiences. And then in June, when he was passing through Palo Alto before heading off to Italy, where he is now, and then going on to India, he said to me, I don't really feel to write this book myself, and then he asked me if I would write it, which is not a question that you say no to. So I said, of course, not really knowing exactly what I would do, but having written one book, the second one, all I can say from experience is it's a world different than the first one. I think the third and fourth will be easier, but nonetheless, we're standing here. But the issue was I didn't have enough stories, so I sent out, I decided I had a week when I wasn't speaking here, so I went up to Ananda village because it's a real, devotees per square inch is the most concentrated up there. And people are a little bit always reluctant, and I knew I could bombard them with no less than 4 announcements of my coming and what I needed, and the result was people actually came and talked to me about experiences that they'd had. I'm saying all of this because I haven't yet, as I say, mined the field of this community, so I need your help too. I know how reluctant you are. Either send them to me by email or just tell me you're interested and I'll telephone you. Direct conversation actually works best because then we can get much more deeply into it. Plus, it's much more fun for me. And that's what I also wanted to talk about really deeply today. I've had a certain, the word isn't exactly hesitation, but I haven't known how to approach this book. Because even though I've lived my entire life in the atmosphere of being a devotee, devoted to God, devoted to Guru, my way of approaching life is not necessarily, oh, what a miracle, that was a miracle, that was a miracle, that was a miracle, that was a miracle. It's just, I have a more sort of pragmatic way of going at things, and I don't seek for cosmic explanations. I tend to keep my mind a little bit, frankly, too much on the mundane. That's what I've understood from this experience. Because part of the question is, why did he ask me to write this book? But what happened to me, I spent 4.5 days in Sacramento in the Ananda village talking to people, and they came to me specifically to tell me about their personal experiences with the divine. Many people like me say that the real miracle is that I'm standing here at all, that I'm on the spiritual path, given what I've been through, and that God found me where I was and brought me to here. That's a different book. That's a great book, How I Got on the Path. That's a good one to write. That's not the one I'm writing. But what happened was I sat there and many different people came, different ages, different backgrounds, different positions in life. Some would be viewed by people in the world as great dynamic examples of extraordinary talent. Others were very humble. Some were physically unwell. Some were beautiful. Just the whole, put them all in a room and there you have it. Every single one of them has a deep relationship with God. And here's the most astonishing part. God has a deep relationship with every one of them. It wasn't like he only likes the young, attractive, talented ones, Or those who have always, ever since I was a child, I was pious kind of thing. He loves the 6-time married person who used to be a falling down drunk and then still looking right at me, telling me this story, are these beautifully devoted eyes talking to me about the perfect love and care they have received from what they feel to be the master, the angel, the form of God, the mother. Everybody has a different way of feeling it. And the most astonishing thing was, it was true. There was no feeling that people were deluding themselves. Some of the stories defy the law of physics. So there was, in many cases, a concrete reality to this, and in other cases, it was a personal experience, but still, I mean, yes, you can be cynical, but why? You know, because it was so self-evident that if you call to God, He will answer. That's fairly basic to the spiritual path. But many things, when we actually know them, and don't merely think them or hear about them or even speak them, but really know them, everything in the universe just rearranges itself. And I wrote to Swamiji how I don't know what's going to happen when I actually try to write up all these wonderful stories that they and you are giving me. But already, personally, I feel the potential of what He's asked me to do has been largely fulfilled in me. And my prayer, which I hope God answers, is that somehow or another, through the telling of all these different incidences, everyone who picks up this book will understand that too. If we can move through this world with a certainty, not merely a hope, but with a certainty that we are loved and cared for, the whole planet would be different, wouldn't it? I went into the Apple store on University Avenue looking for, I make the mistake of actually trying to use equipment that is more than a minute old. And so all the plugs have changed, and things that look perfectly good to me, I'm told by the clerks there, are vintage. Isn't that a fabulous word? That's actually their term of art, vintage. Of course, I wear the same color that all the Apple techies wear. I wrote in a letter once that a group of us went to the Apple store with Swami Kriyananda when he was here right after we'd become Nayaswamis, and we're wearing this blue color. And Swamiji was all dressed in blue, and about 5 or 6 of us were dressed in blue. And it was a very crowded day. Sometimes in the Apple store, it's a whole nother universe. And we're all in there, and it's about 8 or 10 of us, many of us dressed in blue, and Swami all dressed in blue, and this whole big scene. And as we walked out, some of the clerks chased us out of the store and sort of said to us, pointing to Swamiji, "Who is that man? Is he the archangel of Apple?" Well, in a sense, I mean, what do you answer? Yes, it could be true for all I know. But this was a different experience, and it happened on the sidewalk. There were 2 young women there. They could have even been high school age. They certainly weren't older than college. And they were there for Greenpeace. And they were very creative and dynamic. It's not my way of expressing things, but I respected the fact that they were really into it. They really engaged me. Because I was wearing blue, she said, "Obviously you are a lover of oceans," which was a very creative start, And then we went through this a bit. And then I came out and we were talking again, and she looks at me and she starts talking about, the importance of what they're doing, which is saving the planet, basically. I just looked at her and I said, "You have no idea how far into this I actually am." But I said, "I admire your creativity and your zeal," and so I let her talk to me for a while, but there was nothing I really felt to do. My answer to all telemarketers is, "I give all my charity to my church. Thank you so much for calling," and that's stops the whole conversation. I give all my charity to helping people change their consciousness. I didn't explain it to her as much, but I did say I teach meditation. So you can come at it from your side, I'll come at it from my side, and maybe we'll meet somewhere in the middle and it'll work. Because all of these realities that we're dealing with, all of the problems of the planet, and I've said this standing here before, are all a question of consciousness. We are out of harmony. We are out of harmony with that which is. In the Festival of Light, we say, "Pray also for the grace to share with others as you have received, for you are a part of all that is." Now, that's the reality that we're working for. That's what it is to be a child of God, to be a devotee. It's not a matter of who your master is or what you call your religion or how you carry out your devotions or what you even ask God for. And none of that. It's a question of feeling within our own consciousness this reality that we are not what we seem. And in our reading today, it has the word surrender. Surrender is the path to victory. And surrender is a very peculiar word because we tend to think of it as weak. You only surrender. In fact, sometimes Swamiji doesn't use the word. I think he surrenders to the use of the word surrender because it's a word that people know. Often he prefers the word self-offering because self-offering is a dynamically chosen personal act. Surrender may be when all other options fail. Maybe I'll just go to this one. And like Swamiji often tells the joke of the criminal who was in front of the judge, and the judge says, "How do you plead?" And he says, "Your Honor, I plead for mercy." The word is guilty or not guilty, but mercy is what we plead for. And the concept of surrender is often, coupled with the plea for mercy. Treat me tenderly, Lord. And yes, a lot of times, our spiritual life is about surrender. Everybody who's been through any of the 12 steps process, which of course it's interesting in our times how many people come to God by first finding themselves in a position to need to go through one of those 12-step programs. But it's all about recognizing, it doesn't work by myself, Lord. And I know because I tried it. This is what Master tells us. We know because we tried it. There are many pathways that we no longer follow. And we don't not follow them because somebody shook their finger at us and said, don't follow them. We don't follow them because we know they don't work. And Master tells us the reason we know is because we have been there, done that. And we know where it leads, and we're just not going down that road again. And oftentimes that's the point at which we plead for mercy and we're willing to surrender. Now, what are we surrendering? Sometimes people think what you're surrendering is my self-will. What I'm surrendering is my dynamic creativity, my ability to take care of myself. And we sometimes think, and this is a phrase you hear all the time, I don't want to bother God. I don't want to bother him. Well, he has nothing else to do, is the first point. People often say that to me, I don't want to bother you. I said, look, this is my full-time reality. If you don't bother me, I have nothing else to do. It's not like you're bothering me. This is what we live for, is to help one another on the spiritual path. It's like saying to your mother, oh, mother, I would like to be your child, but I don't want to bother you. You were born to be that woman's child, and she wanted you to be her child. To say to God, I'm not going to bother you, is to deny our own reality. But you see, that's exactly what we do. We get this very confused idea, and often we even attribute it to God. I need to take care of myself. Yes, God will help me, but I have to do my part too. But often that's a very complicated delusion. It's not an obvious one, but it's a delusion and a deep one nonetheless. Because what we're declaring is that somehow I am not part of all that is. That God is not really my father, or if he is my father, he's really taking care of the other children and he doesn't really have time for me. And even more than that, he doesn't really want to hear from me very often. He just wants me to take care of my business and then just not bother him. What we're really being asked to surrender is this delusion that we actually exist separate from the divine flow. And all our weaknesses, all our suffering, all our failures, and certainly all our unhappiness stem from that simple thought. I'm out here all by myself. What will become of me? How will I make these decisions? How will I do this work? What happens if I lose my job? Will my children come out okay? What do I do about the black sheep in our family? How will I take care of my aging parents? All of those are literally overwhelming. If we see ourselves standing here bearing the responsibility, because among other things, it's totally out of our control. It's a really scary position. And honestly, I don't know how people can live imagining that they're in this world all by themselves. And that's why it was so extraordinarily moving to spend those last 5 days having people come to me, look me right in the eye with their beautiful, divinely inspired eyes and say, I am not alone. In my hour of need, whether it was a tiny little thing that hardly mattered, or whether it was calling upon what I believe is a legion of angels who just hang out on the corners of every highway in America, saving people from smashing to bits, like I should have been dead. I don't know how I wasn't. I don't know why we didn't crash. I was about to have an impact, and then I was someplace else and the car had been moved. I mean, literally, I heard stories of there's no way that the impact didn't happen, but then a second later I was elsewhere on the highway and it didn't happen. But the reason those stories are so profoundly moving is because it cracks through this illusion that I'm out here by myself, that I am a part of all that is. And where the insecurity comes from is when we're alone. When we see ourselves as a part of that, then it's replaced by completely so transformative that we literally can't imagine. And how do we come into that relationship? We surrender the false idea that we're not already there. As funny as that sounds, we're the only ones who keep ourselves separate. There's no actual truth to that. It's just something that we play with. We're kind of like crazy people in a little asylum somewhere, where, like lunatics, I mean in an exaggerated sense, who just have this idea. They walk around being Napoleon, they walk around being Queen Elizabeth, they walk around being, Cleopatra, or whatever it might be, and you kind of humor them because this is who they think they are. Or you see little children who are all, when I was 6 years old, I took ballet classes, and I have a karmic samskars, a past life connection to being a dancer. I took a few ballet classes as a child. I've never acted it out in this life, but I feel it. And when I was 6, and still you're half in one world and half in another, my mother gave me ballet classes with Miss Alethea. Her last name was Glimp. Her actual name was Alethea Glimp. So she didn't have us call us Mrs. Glimp, which would have been horrible. We called her Miss Alethea, which was a perfect name for a ballet dancer. And I was 6, and I remember vividly how fantastic I was. And then after my parents died and I was looking through pictures, I found a 6-year-old picture of me in the costume I remember, pink satin tutu, silver ribbon around the edge, silver ribbon here, big silver bow in my hair, and I'm standing there like this. I was not fabulous, let's just put it that way. It was real obvious. But inside myself, I was something so different. And they actually say that often when children are doing things like that, singing, dancing, painting, that they really are living in past lives when they were good at these things. And so their perception of their talent is based on a real memory of skill that this body doesn't have anymore. And I really feel, at least for me, that's what I was doing. It wasn't just a dream, because it was an actual experience. But looking at me, I wasn't. But inside I was. Now this is the confusion that we get into as lunatics, as the Swamiji said, this whole world is a hospital, like an ambulatory hospital. We're all just walking around, but we're all lunatics. We have this strange idea that we're on our own. We have this really peculiar idea that God can't be bothered with us. And the only thing we're being asked to surrender is that misery-producing delusion. Pretty stupid to hold on to it, isn't it? Swamiji, I mean, stupid is a word, it's not a nice word to use. But there's no other word for it. To continually do something that is not in our best interests, well, we don't yet know. But the more we can concentrate and redefine ourselves and bring our thoughts and feelings back again and again and again and again, every time it wanders, to whatever moments we have had when we know that we are not alone in this world, and no matter what we think, what we feel, what opinions we have, God knows what is best for us. That's why we pray, Heavenly Father, Divine Mother. Whatever our actual experiences in this world of those relationships, our heart knows what those relationships are meant to be. Mother loves us. Father guides us. And just as Swamiji writes elsewhere, just as a little child in a happy home lives carefree in the sure knowledge that those wiser and more capable are taking care of him, so we, as children of God in this world, can and should, when we are willing to surrender to that greater truth, can live in the same way. Oh, we have to work just as the child has to do his chores and go to school and get along with his brothers and sisters, all of those things. We have a job to do here. And it's a big job. We have to be ourselves. That's a big job. We have to fulfill the destiny for which we were born. But we don't have to worry about it. God will, if we ask Him, come into our hearts, take responsibility for our lives, be the animating force, and give us all that we long for. All that we desire is fulfilled in the divine.